Hello, my name is Kiki Hopt. I am an enrolled member of the Sac and Fox Nation of Oklahoma. I live in the Duwamish territory of the Coast Salish people. I'm also part of the Makah tribe of Nia Bay. The Seattle area is the Cedar watershed and the Tolt River watershed. So, yeah, that is where I'm from.
Siya nagada, medikogan, dogodoa, ani yuya, talagi, aya, elawadihi, digwenasa. Hello everyone, my name is Mary Crow. I am Eastern Band Cherokee from the Kuala Boundary in western North Carolina. My people live near the Oconaluftee, the Tuckasegee, and the Nantahala rivers. I am the Indigenous Just Transition Organizer for the Indigenous Environmental Network. So we're here today, Kiki and I, to talk about the Indigenous Just Transition. And while this is a new platform, technically to the Indigenous Environmental Network Organization, it's been a concept that's been long in the making. Excuse me. We had our first IJT, Indigenous Just Transition Assembly, and held at the Haskell Indian Nations University in 2019, where we met with close to 150 Native relatives from all over Turtle Island and Alaska, some from Canada, to come down and talk about this program, this concept of Indigenous Just Transition. And so people ask, what is it? Like with the Indigenous Environmental Network, we say we know what you're against. We know what you're against is, big oil, false solutions of hydrogen, carbon capture, all these things that are coming. We know what we're against. But what is the Indigenous Environmental Network for? And so with that, we started looking at, what is our organization for? And so we started looking at our traditional communities, looking at our traditional knowledge keepers. We realized that we have to start really encouraging our Native communities to start practicing and uplifting their traditional knowledge. And the three concepts of an Indigenous Just Transition is your relationship and your responsibility to Mother Earth as Indigenous peoples. What is our sovereignty? We have inherent sovereignty. We have traditional sovereignty. And folks ask, well, what is the difference? And we'll explain that here shortly. And then the third is, what is our transformation into action? What is it that we want to see transform for people to take action in uplifting their traditional knowledge? And so one of the things we talk about more as we go deeper in discussion is that it first starts off with language justice. We have to encourage our relatives to begin, relearning their traditional languages. We see, because the forced assimilation and acculturation, a lot of our relatives, we weren't allowed to speak our language, let alone practice our traditional ways. And so we don't have to be that anymore, right? But we also have the other side of spirituality. What is that spiritual connection that we have as Indigenous people? And so that's where the part of responsibility and relationship is. As Indigenous peoples, what was our relationship to Mother Earth? What was our traditional teachings to Mother Earth? And also, what was our responsibility? In our communities, within our villages, what were the things that we did to build that community and to protect and take care of it? So then we talk about, looking at where we're at today in our traditional government structures, right? And then we talk about inherent sovereignty and tribal sovereignty. And what we try to explain is that inherent sovereignty comes before contact. before European contact, we were inherently sovereign as indigenous peoples to this Western Hemisphere before it was known as the Americas, right? And so then we're looking at, well, then what is our tribal sovereignty? And that comes, when the Europeans recognized us as nations of people. And so when we go into communities and talk, then we say, okay, from learning that and uplifting that, then how can we transform ourselves into that action, of revitalizing our traditional ways, encouraging language justice, encouraging food sovereignty, building sustainable communities. All these things that we did, prior to European contact is one thing, but where are we now? And what do we need to do today? So with that, Kiki, I'd just like to ask, what are your thoughts and your perspectives of an Indigenous just transition through your lens and your eyes?
Yeah, thank you. First off, thank you for having me. And we're here in Lenape Hoking lands at the Climate Week. And so, yeah, we had a march yesterday, and it was just really great to see all the natives out there and us all come together in these ways, and especially seeing our youth out here coming together. Yeah, it really touches my heart to see us following the footsteps of our ancestors, and also here taking direction from our elders and the people that are paving the way for us. And that's what I want to do for the youth as well. I see a lot of youth out here, and they're all up there, and they're just so cute. They're just representing in good ways and in their regalia. And yeah, I think that there needs to be a lot of healing, and I see it happening, and I feel it happening because that intergenerational trauma from colonialism, like it's affected all of us, and it's stripped away that connection that we naturally have as Indigenous people. So yeah, it's beautiful. Every time I'm around everyone here, it's just a good vibe, and yeah, it just feels so right. We're in the heart of New York City. I mean, this is like a city, right? It's colonialism, but yet we're still holding it down, and we're still here representing. So yeah, I think I see a lot of it happening in small communities, and yeah, I mean, a lot of the youth, we're all just on board with recycling and not littering and reducing plastic use, polyester, things like that. I think those are really important aspects to combating these issues, and just not feeding into capitalism and colonialism. Like, if you feed the system, it's just going to continue the system, right? The machine. So yeah, you have to fight back. So yeah, I like being around everyone here. It's a good time. So yeah.
Yeah, like one of the things that we see today is that awakening and that urgency to be able to dress in our traditional attire, our traditional clothing, especially, I had one woman ask about the ribbon skirts and explaining that, when Europeans came and brought cloth and those things to our villages and trade or whatever, then we adapted to them and added them to our our daily outfits and our attires, especially the women, as well as putting the elk teeth and the different bone and things that we embellished that material with. And so to see a lot of our younger our women, just our native women, everyone coming out with their beautiful ribbon skirts and and taking pride and honoring that. And it was good to see our young relatives in this march wearing our contemporary traditional wear, as we call it.
Yeah.
And encouraging them to really hey, make your own traditional clothing. Those are some of the parts of an Indigenous just transition, is being able to take pride and honor, in a humbling way, that this is who we are. We do have a distinct identity, and, we, 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 we do get respect out there when folks see us. So I was really glad to see that.
Yeah.
I guess for me, I would ask, what do you see in your communities when it comes to, language justice and food sovereignty? We have our urban relatives, and then we have our relatives that live on reserves and boundaries, and not too many live in their traditional homelands.
Mm.
So what do you see and feel about that?
Yeah, so I live in Seattle, so technically I'm an urban Indian.
Hmm.
But yeah, I grew up a little bit on the Makah Reservation in Nia Bay. My original tribe in Oklahoma is Sac and Fox Nation, and that was checkerboarded.
Hmm.
My people are originally from the Great Lakes area, and they
Hmm.
came down through the Trail of Tears and just got pushed down. So my mother's side and her family all grew up checkerboarded in a white town. So I grew up partially in Albuquerque, and then I grew up partially in Nia Bay, and then a small town in Washington. So yeah, it's been a blessing to be a part of, reservation and res life, and then also a part of that city life. And so, yeah, just connecting with a lot of different natives who are in the city or in the country or on the res. What's really important, I think, is for all of us to hold each other accountable to returning to your lands and holding, space for learning your language, or at least connecting in some sort of way, because that's the way that we acknowledge being indigenous. You can't just claim indigeneity. I mean, from what I see, you can't just claim it. You have to actually be a part of the way of life, and have to adopt it and abide by it. So it's more than just an identity. So yeah, a lot of times I see folks out here, connecting by learning how to make their ribbon skirts, taking those language classes online, connecting with, even if there's urban like spaces for tribal members who may be a part of like a tribe outside of the city. It's really cool to see, natives finding that space for, if they're Tlingit, Haida. There are spaces like that out there. So yeah, that's definitely a good way to connect, I feel. And yeah, even a smallest amount of wanting to connect or learn your language, or even researching a little bit and just doing it a little bit at a time, or if you want to just fully indulge and become fluent, if you can, if your language is still intact, because a lot of times it's being revitalized. So yeah, I think just putting energy into it is super important, and the smallest steps make a difference. So yeah.
We talk about colonialism and the impact of the historic and generational um, trauma that indigenous peoples of the Americas have felt since colonialism. And again, we know the tragic parts, but what are the good happy parts, right? And that's still being able to maintain. Not all is lost.
Mhm.
And one thing that I tried to explain to my children was that we have the opportunity to create new traditions.
Mm.
As people, we had to adapt and evolve all the time.
Yeah.
To fit into whatever block it was here in the so-called Americas. But
Mhm.
but like I said, we had a lot of our people that held on to those traditional ways. Like traditional foods. Where I'm from, in western North Carolina and the Great Smoky Mountains, in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, we still sustain ourselves there through hunting and fishing, gathering our traditional, spring greens, our berries, our fall nuts. We also have gardens within our community. We're
Mm.
a rural area, and we only have one grocery store
Mm.
within our area. We also have a lot of tourists that come through because of the Great Smoky Mountains and because of casinos. But how do we protect our lands?
Mm.
We're known as the salamander capital of the world, and the salamander are your freshwater indicators.
Mm. Mhm.
And so we have to be really vigilant and telling the tourists, you're welcome to swim in the rivers, but leave the rocks alone. Don't be stacking rocks because we have a big lizard in there called the hellbender, and we call them water dogs, but they're this big lizard that goes about 2 feet long,
Yeah.
and they look really scary and ugly, but then again, they're really cute. eh? But they are our freshwater indicators within our river of the Oconaluftee, the Nantahala, and the Tuckasegee, which run in our traditional territories. And so it's important when we see the ecosystems that we have left. How do we protect that? How do we acknowledge that? And so recently, um, my Cherokee sister Levita Hill and I worked on a campaign to restore Kauai to what was known as Klingman's Dome in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Now, when we talk about land back, we as indigenous peoples didn't possess and hold land like the colonizers did, right? And so what we talk about is recognizing those areas and their significance to our people. And so we work to restore Kauai. Kawa is a mulberry in our language, in Cherokee language. Kauai is mulberry place, the place where the mulberries grow. And it's the highest peak in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. But to our people, it's a very sacred area. When we were told that the bears held council there, we were told that our medicine people went there, our prophets went there, and so when they came through and started, coming in and exploring the area, right? And they started naming these places, and giving them to, white people, that had no connection or relationship whatsoever. And so when the Great Smoky Mountains was created in the 1950s, they named that highest peak from a gentleman by the name of Thomas Lanier Klingman. And so it was named Klingman's Dome for a long time. And so when my sister Levita and I, got together and really, said, hey, that we really want to do this. It's to see if we can restore Kauai. We were contacted by the Klingman family. And I want to share this in as much as building a bridge of people as human beings, right? And Mr. Klingman wrote to our principal chief at the time, and he heard of our efforts in our campaign to restore Kauai to that place. His name was Thomas Lanier Klingman. And so he writes to us and tells us that he wanted to support us, and his family supported us in our efforts to restore Kauai. And he made a comment in his letter that really struck my heart. He said the reason being is why he was at first honored that, he had that name, and carrying that name. He realized that that person, even though he was a state senator, was in support of the Confederacy and slavery. And he had just adopted his son from Guatemala, and he lives in Maryland. And he said the first time that he heard a racial slur, thrown at his son, it broke his heart, and he realized that he told me, he said, I didn't want my son, if he ever had a child, to name him after me. And I was like, why? He said, because of, the bad stuff. And I was like, no, you can't help it. I said, you can restore honor to the Klingman family by supporting us in this effort. And so he wrote letters to the U.S. Geographical Names Office and said that his family, supported us. We were able to get the name restored in September 18th of 2024. Wow. And so that's part of us, that just transition of being able to support not just here in Western North Carolina, but they also did that in the Yellowstone National Park. They changed Doan Mountain to First Peoples Mountain because there's 97 native communities that live around the Yellowstone National Park, right?
Yeah.
So now we're seeing what's going on with POTUS 47 coming in and stripping those names back, taking Denali, and recalling it, Mount McKinley, I think it is, right? Gulf of America to,
Yeah.
from Gulf of Mexico. So, there were some questions on that. What if he tries to do that? And I said, the federal government's going to do what they're going to do, right? We Native people know that. But as long as our people know, as long as our our Cherokee people, Tsalagi, as long as we know Kawahi in our hearts and in our minds, when we restore it in there and build it up, that's part of our just transitioning back to who we originally are. And so we encourage folks, to go and to not just acknowledge the land that you're in, but those significant areas that meant that was very sacred or special to your people, uplifting those and share them. So now we have Kawahi Connection Days, and we've been working with the Park Service and another organization in Cherokee to bring students, elementary, high school students from the surrounding counties, as well as our tribal school, to come up and spend a day and learn about the area. And then we have little outposts where they can go and learn about our songs and our dances, our plants and our animals that, sustained us. We do storytelling and dancing up there. And so it's really good to see that type of initiative, but those things to be examples of what we would like to see as a true Indigenous just transition is uplifting ourselves within our communities and building, those strong relationships and taking on those big responsibilities, and then understanding our power, who we are as sovereign nations of people, but more so lifting up our communities and empowering our relatives, to take back who we originally are, and can be and shall be as we move forward.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I took the mic off the stand and we just went for it. But I just wanted to say, if you have any last minute, closing comments that you want to give before we close this session out.
Yeah, I was always taught to listen to my elders and listen to, the folks who know more. And, I've always been a young person, right? I'm just getting older. So, yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and it's an honor to have these ways and to be Indigenous and to just have beautiful people maintaining this sacred connection that we all have with our Mother Earth and our ways. And so, yeah, I encourage everyone to really listen to this and reflect on yourself and reflect on how you can connect with your own space wherever you're at. If you can connect with your homelands, I see it. I see it a lot of times. A lot of folks on the res, like all the youngins, they like on Makah res, they learn their language, and everyone knows like Slahalberry, Cedar. It's all sacred, and so yeah, young folks really take pride in that too. And I just went to Makah days, and everyone danced and has regalia, and so. Yeah, it's Makah strong, right? Like right. Natives know.
Right.
So yeah, and I think non-natives, they see that too, and it's even prophesized a lot of times. So yeah, I think Indigenous people are definitely at the forefront of that just transition. And again, I encourage everyone to visit Indigenous Environmental Network and get connected and look at those resources, and especially just connect with yourself, because I think at the end of the day, we all know deep down what is needed, and that's to protect Mother Earth and protect our connection. Because, yeah, the Trump and everyone, it's an energy at the end of the day that we have to combat. So, yeah.
Right, and sometimes it's our own energy that we have to combat, and how we allow ourselves to be part of that, because it does affect us all. But thank you, Kiki, and I appreciate you sitting and giving us part of your time this afternoon. Again, this is Kiki Hopt. I said her name right. I just wanted to make sure I said your name right. She's with the Sac and Fox Nation of Oklahoma. My name is Mary Crow. I am the Indigenous Just Transition Organizer for the Indigenous Environmental Network, and we encourage you to visit our website at www.inenearth.org. And we also encourage you to be listening all this week as we're here in New York Action Climate Week. Climate Action Week. I always get those terms mixed up, but you know what I mean. Hey, but yeah, keep listening. We're going to have more interviews tomorrow, Tuesday evening. We're going to be having a webinar panel discussion. We're excited about that, so we encourage everyone, if you can, to tune in to all of IEN social media pages, and keep watch and get in contact with us if you'd like for us to come into your community and help you organize. Give us a call, and we'd be happy to talk with you all. But with that, we thank you, and everyone have a good evening.
Yat everyone, welcome back. Sha'e Brenna Yellow Thunder Yanishia, Twitch Eatney Nishla, Touch Eatney Dashiche, Wanagire Wangshik Bashichin, Standing Raksu Dashanella, Conplanet Dat Nasha, Akut Eago Dene, Ado Ho Chunk, Ado Standing Rock Astan Nishla. Hi everyone, my name is Brenna Yellow Thunder. I'm Bitterwater Clan, born for Warrior Clan. My maternal grandfather is Red Running Through the Water Clan, and my paternal grandfather is Standing Rock. And in these ways, I'm a Ho Chunk Dene and Standing Rock person. And I'm coming to you from Black River Falls, Neohawani, and also Kintlunna, and the watersheds that are near both of those lands are Black River Falls and the Colorado River. So I'm very excited to be here. I'm with the Indigenous Environmental Network as the lead coordinator for the Keep It in the Ground program, and I'm super excited to be sitting here with my guest, my co-host. So I'll pass it over to you.
All right. Shionagara vel dagodoa. Elodi de Gwenisha E. I am with the Eastern Cherokee organization. That is the organization, but I'm also with IN volunteering my time. And I'm very excited to be here as well.
Yeah, so we're here at, I think our previous host talked about it, but I'll say it again in case we have anyone new joining. We're here in New York on the Lenape-Hoking for the New York Climate Week.
Mm-hmm.
And technically we're at the American Indian Community House, who has so graciously lent their space to us so that we could come to you from our Indigenous Media Hub and bring y'all some news about what we're doing here and what's happening on the ground. And you can check out the American Indian Community House at aich.org. You can also check out IEN and what else we're going to be doing here in New York at ienearth.org as well. So it's funny, before we hopped on, we were talking about something that was kind of deep, but I feel like it really relates to a lot of what's really important to bring up while we're here at New York Climate Week. We were talking about MMIR, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm someone who is woman presenting. However, I am not a woman.
Mm-hmm.
I would, in English, might call it two-spirit or non-binary, but that's not really the way that we saw it in from my different tribes. And so, yeah, and we were talking about like the violence that is inflicted on our bodies as people who are Native, but also people who are not straight or not cis,
Mm-hmm.
and how that kind of like is a reflection of the violence that is inflicted on the earth itself. And I think that's something that we were both really resonating with and feeling, especially considering some of the stuff we ran into at the march yesterday, or even we were talking about IEN's like biannual kind of irregular Protecting Mother Earth conference that y'all were at, and it was at your homelands last year.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that I've resonated with a lot. I actually lived in New York City this past year. I moved up here back in 2020 to go to school at Marymount Manhattan, and that's when I first started recognizing that I was not a woman in a way, at least with society's standards of what a woman is. And you know, it really got me thinking, because I saw a lot of other people be so confident in who they were. And me coming into college, I was just like, not confused, because, you know, I was very much
on your journey to decolonizing.
On my journey, at the very beginning. And I didn't understand a lot of it until, you know, they were asking me like, what are your pronouns? And, at first I was like, everybody, like, well, what are pronouns? And then, they were explaining it more to me. And then I had some of my other friends who came and grew up in a different, state, with a whole different vibe and everything, to where they were able to accept who they were and were able to show that to me, which I think is kind of insane as well, because, as Indigenous people, I'm always told, especially around in my people in the EBCI, Eastern Band and Cherokee, that we didn't really have gender roles, and we didn't really, that wasn't something we were really concerned about. And it made me think, well, why am I concerned about it? You know what I mean? Why is that so concerning? And so I moved back home after about a year in Marymount, Manhattan, in New York City. And I had all these new outlooks on life. And then to go back to, your own town with your own people, where everybody knows you, it's very hard to break out of that, and that's one thing that I really struggled with a lot was, being this certain person in high school and elementary school and middle school, and then, breaking out of that and then coming back home and then having to be reintroduced to as a person that you didn't even recognize, if that makes sense. And so, it's something that I had to, teach my mom, teach my sister, teach my brother, teach literally everybody around me about this new thing. And it was kind of scary. It was kind of frightening. I'm pretty sure we've talked about this before. Like it's something that I am very proud of myself, of being, as you would say, non-binary, two-spirit. But, I also didn't want to step on anyone's toes. Like, I didn't want to make my mom, the person who has called me a certain name and certain pronouns my entire life. I didn't want her to just forget about it and then go back and relearn it, especially at her age of motherhood. I didn't, she already went through 2 other kids. I didn't want to make her go through that. But I had to recognize that, like, and I say this with peace and love, it's not about her feelings, and it's not about my sister's feelings or my brother's feelings. It's about my feelings. And I deserve that amount of respect, and I deserve that amount of I guess, care that people have for other people. And it was something that I really struggled with. And then I saw how that would play into moving forward with my life, with the violence, with the people thinking that they have access to me when they don't. And it was really hard. And I saw it firsthand, especially, what we were talking about with the PME. Like, I noticed that a lot of non-native people who were there in native spaces weren't there for the right reasons. And it was really disheartening to see, because, like, even certain things that had happened, it didn't go unnoticed. It didn't go unnoticed, especially by me, because, being in the city, you have to be on edge at all times. You have to know where you're at. You have to see your surroundings. You have to know where you're at, especially as Indigenous people, as Indigenous, quote unquote, women presenting people. It's something that you have to be on your P's and Q's about. But when it comes to being back home, like, that was a safe space for me. That should have been a safe space for a lot of people. And one bad apple can ruin the entire batch. And that's ultimately something that we had to experience. And that just goes for anywhere. And knowing that violence doesn't have to be tolerated. And just because a certain person experiences that and you do not experience that, doesn't mean it didn't happen. And it doesn't mean that it shouldn't have that same respect and have that same attention to it. If that makes sense.
I think it does, especially because I know you're talking about what I feel like it is the relationship that you're trying to build with your family that is different than what it was before, is very much, I feel like, something that you can see at even like at New York Climate Week, where you can see folks trying to rebuild their relationship with like the land or the environment. It's like other people's relationships with the land or with you are a certain way and can be extractive, or they can be inflicting hurt on you. And in some ways it's kind of up to us to like say something and stand up, and in another way it's like that's putting all the like onus on us. It
On
makes
us,
us
yeah.
have to be the ones to do all the labor, and like that's something that you see even in a space during a time like New York Climate Week where you feel like folks would want to and be able to listen to Indigenous people when we talk about the land. That's rarely ever the case. And even
Yeah.
if they do, then it's in a way that is comfortable for them. So it's like you're trying to build an understanding in this other person that's like a cultural understanding, but also trying to take care of yourself at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's something that is uniquely familiar to a lot of two-spirit relatives, which is why I find that a lot of us end up having like a very special and specific relationship to like the movement or to our culture, or because we have to spend our lives understanding that the person we are isn't what is taught to be perceived by even our loved ones. Like they
Yeah.
see us a certain way, we're taught to see the land in a certain way, and the idea of trying to change that feels like the weight of all Mother Earth on your shoulders.
Yeah. I witnessed that, firsthand of going to school, being freshly 18, going to a school where you were literally the 1%, the only Native person there. And my school did a land acknowledgement.
Your high
And
school?
my college did a land acknowledgement. But what was crazy, like, was I want to say their intentions were really good, but they did during Native American Heritage Month. They kind of I don't know, they didn't do what I wanted them to do. Obviously, they never really do. But with the school that was predominantly a white school or non-Native school, it was very hard for them to find resources or they made it seem like it was really hard to find Native speakers, to find people to come in, and I was the 1% that I could have done it, but I had to learn that it's not my responsibility ultimately to do that. And I had to explain that to a lot of my professors, because we've talked about this too, I'm a big theater nerd, I'm a big Broadway person. That's why I moved to New York City in the first place. And being told by your professor on occupied Native Lenape land that there was not a space for you there in that community was insane. And I was like, I'm paying like $30,000 to be here, and to be told like there's no shows written for you, there's no roles written for you, there's no songs written for you, for your specific identity, your race, your ethnicity. Like, I'm sorry. And to be told that out of a group full of, non-Native people, whether that be, white people or non-white people, it was really hard, because I felt like I was the first person that they had to tell that to. And it really did a lot to me, because then I was like, well, am I supposed to be here? Like, what am I supposed to do? And, I felt that comfort of going back home and knowing the land and knowing where I come from and knowing that's where my dad's buried. That's where, our placentas are buried. Me and my sister and my brother, my mom buried us there. So I am part of the earth. And, that's something that I felt that I had a special place to come back to. If anything were to go wrong, I knew that I had a special place to go back to. And that was Cherokee. That was in North Carolina. And, that is our ancestral homelands, and we're blessed to be able to be there. And I didn't recognize that until I got home and was like, oh, wow, this is my land. This is where we started, and this is where I want to end. And, it took a lot to appreciate that. I had to leave to appreciate that. And, we talked about that earlier of a lot of Indigenous people, a lot of Two-Spirit people not feeling comfortable in their own spaces and their own homes and having to leave. And often when they do leave, they do inherit violence. They see a shift because now, they're no longer in their safe space, and now they're more vulnerable, and now they're able to, be in situations that they didn't even think of. And, we went on and talked about, MMIR and, I have cousins that are missing. I have cousins that were murdered. I have cousins that have experienced violence, especially two-spirit violence, and hearing their words and their stories, it's heartbreaking, because that could be me, and that is me, and it's very upsetting, and it's something that I have been saying for a really long time, and you can quote me on that. I've been saying it for a really long time. Our people do not have to leave their home to feel safe. Our people shouldn't have to feel unsafe, and that's tying into the environment and our own land and where we reside. We should not have to leave that to feel safe.
Yeah.
And that's what we were really talking about in the conference area earlier today, and it's something that I talk about all the time about that, and I think it all ties together. It's all connected in a way, and
yeah. It's a lot of heavy stuff, but I also think it's important. It's not really a thing that's discussed a lot, especially even like in our Keep It in the Ground pod, we do talk about like extraction on lands and violence of the lands and about how it is against the people. But when it starts to get into like the minutia of like, we're talking about, say, coal mining on Navajo, but at the same time, it's also like, and does the Navajo Nation government still have gay marriage as illegal?
Yeah.
And how is that kind of perpetuated by the violence that was also being invited in to create like the Peabody Coal Mining Company, where the Navajo Nation would get a cut of the money, but then it was the families on the ground who had to suffer the effects. And so it's like, if we continue to keep something as simple as gay marriage, like not legalized, then does it not make sense that so many of our two-spirit relatives are leaving the Navajo Nation, and then we have elders asking, well, where are all our youth going? Why are they leaving? And I'm like, it's because these
all
things,
interconnected.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we witnessed that before, and once again, I've you can quote me again. I've been very outspoken about this, and I know a lot of people in my community have heard me say a lot of stuff, because it's the same thing going on in EBCI. We don't have gay marriage. My brother and my sister can get married on our land, but I can't. And that's upsetting, because I'm like, why do they get to get married? You know what I mean? Like, they don't even want to be married. So it's something that I've had to struggle with. And then, luckily they're not doing it anymore, but, they had for a while, during our Cherokee Indian Fair, the one that we really pride ourselves in, they have this thing called Pretty Legs, and it's where cis men dress up as women.
Okay, so
drag shows. So drag shows, right? You know what I mean? It was something that I kind of was like, wait, because they competed for like money. Like, they would literally queen out at our fair, dress up as women, and it wasn't, their heart wasn't in it, because they were ultimately doing it for the money, and it also perpetuated violence on our women, because they were using stereotypes about our own Native women, cis women, to gain more votes. And I was sitting back like, hey guys, why are our trans people being seen as not trans people? Why don't we have gay marriage? Why don't we have drag shows on the res? Why do our people have to leave quickly? Answer me that. Riddle me this. You know what I mean? And it was upsetting, because they couldn't tell me why. Nobody has yet. Nobody has yet to tell me why and have a valid reason why. And luckily they're not doing it anymore. And one thing that I would say a lot to them, because ultimately Pretty Legs, they were like, well, it's a joke. It's a funny contest, haha. I said, cool, do stand up for me. I want you to grab a mic, stand on the stage, cut some jokes, tell me if you're funny or not. That's how I see if you're funny. Tell me a haha joke. And if you can't do it, you're not funny. And ultimately, you know what they replaced Pretty Legs with? Was a comedy show. They literally had a comedy show. So I was like, you know what? I kind of did that. But, you know, it's something that I had to fight for. And luckily, they probably weren't even listening to me half the time. And they maybe they saw it as problematic. Maybe they didn't. But I've been fighting it for years because I even had to talk with one of our Cherokee relatives about it because he participated in Pretty Legs. And he came up and asked me and was like, "Well, can you talk to me about like two-spirit rights?" And I was like, let me address something really quickly though, because one thing about me, like if I know that you have caused some sort of harm, I'm going to address it. That's just who I am as a person. That's just how I was raised. If I have the opportunity to speak to you in a good, nice way, I will do it. And so I told him, I was like, what you did with Pretty Legs it didn't sit right with me. So if you want to talk to me as a two-spirit person, as a non-binary person, as a queer person, you're going to have to, you know, own up to some of your mistakes. And he did it. He did. He did. And he said, I didn't realize how problematic it was. I didn't realize that, you know, our own two-spirit people who want to be authentically, you know, themselves can't even do that. And I told him that. I said, no, you know how many people are waiting to be able to go and dress feminine? A lot of people who are masculine presenting how much they want to queen out. You know what I mean? Like, do you know how many people want to do that but can't do that? I said, you got to do it every single year. And once again, I even talked about this with my my sister and my brothers. I was like, you know, I think because then the people who would do Pretty Legs would go back and spew that, you know, transphobic rhetoric. And I was like, that's crazy, though. You felt really comfortable in a wig for a good hour or two. And I think that scares them a little bit. I think they're too scared to admit that. But, you know, I'm not going to judge you on that. If you feel comfortable, you know, going and doing Pretty Legs every single year and it gives you a little source of happiness, who am I to say you can't do that? But don't go in our communities and make our trans people feel like they can't be themselves when you get to do that every single fair time and win money on top of that. So it was something that was very contradictory, and I had to explain that to them. Like, we are doing this to ourselves. Like, we are allowing our own people to feel like they can't even be themselves while you get to go and throw it in their face and basically make a mockery out of them. So recognize who you are, recognize your privilege, because that is a privilege to be able to do that. And, you know, it ruffled a little bit of feathers, but, you know, I didn't care. I was tired. I was exhausted. Because then I had to hear about, you know, my cousins who have an alter ego, as they called it. And it was a lot of my two-spirit cousins, and they would talk about it, and they would be like, yeah, like I have an alter ego, like, drag name, and I go to you know, different places in North Carolina to feel safe. And I was like, okay, like, thank you for telling me that. Thank you for feeling safe to share that with me, because I know in our community a lot of times you can't. And yeah, it was just so insane to me to be able to see that a lot of people who were spreading, you know, transphobic rhetoric and very, you know, anti two-spirit rhetoric were also participating in a mockery of them. And then, but also, like, it was a weird mind trip to me. And I don't know, it's something that I've called out for a really, really long time. And I'm glad they're doing a comedy show, and I'm glad they're able to do that, you know, and move forward with it, you know?
Yeah. You know what that reminds me of is, you're literally practicing an indigenous just transition, because it's not just about like switching to renewables. It's about like building that, I don't even want to say anti-colonial, because that creates the binary of like, oh, it's either colonial or it's not. But it's like completely like just from our indigenous way of understanding of how to have relationship with each other, and also with the land, with our understanding of gender, and our understanding of, I don't know if I would say economy, but like the capitalization of it all. And that idea that you're talking to folks who had previously been participating in a practice that was causing harm and saying like, hey, I know that like this is, you know, supposed to be funny, but it's not funny, and maybe you should do something that actually is funny, and then opening up the conversation so that you can have it with someone that was like, hey, can we talk about two-spirit rights? And you got to bring that up and talk about something that had originally been like somewhat of a tradition at your you said Cherokee County Fair.
Yeah, a Cherokee Indian Fair, so it's
Cherokee
our own tribal fair.
Something that had previously been a tradition at the Cherokee Indian Fair, we're able to recognize and say, hey, actually this is causing harm, let's indigenously and
let's just
justly
transition. yes, being able to move forward on that. And you know, I hope one day we're able to fully transition, you know, into a more progressive and more accepting and a more what's the word I'm looking for? Just community, being a community again, and caring for everybody in our community. And you know, once again, I think it is also funny to use the word transition, especially in the talk that we're having right now. You know, like it's a, you know, it's a double meaning. Just a transition. Exactly. We should transition. And you know, and it's something that, you know, I've been very outspoken about, and especially during the selection season, I've been trying to get more people to be open about, you know, how they feel, and especially for our tribal councils, because these are our leaders. And what are you going to do to make your own people be able to feel seen? All of them, every single one that you are representing. That's why you're in that seat. And I feel that way about anything, any organization, any group, anything. How are you as leaders going to move? And how are you going to allow the people that you're representing to feel represented in a good way? And so, you know, that's something that we've definitely talked about. And
It's beautiful. Thank you for the beautiful conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I feel, because one of the big things we're trying to do here is, one, we're trying to like hold the line and try to be the people who are still fighting for the land and being our most authentic indigenous selves. But we're also trying to speak back to our communities. And so us being able to tell them, like, not only are we doing this here in New York, but also these are the issues that are on our lands that we face every day that we need to address, and how it's all tied together. So thank you so much, Val. I really appreciate having you on here. I think we're going to be like close out for the day. And so this is Brenna Yellow Thunder with Indigenous Environmental Network. You can see more about what we're doing this week at New York Climate Week at our website, ienearth.org, and also we will be doing these daily interviews with different community members. And then finally, would really like to encourage everyone to tune in to our webinar on Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, where we will be talking and hearing with other community members about what are some of the things that we're fighting for here in New York and why it's important that we are here. So, Ahiahe and Pina Gigi, thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.